I hopped onto the Epiphone website to see if there were any new models, and I was shocked. The former Japan exclusive TAC Matsumoto Epiphone has finally made it to the United States. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. To say I was elated was an understatement because I wanted to review this model, but the problem was even at my cost to import one of these from Japan, it would have been $2,000, and who's gonna pay that for an Epiphone, even if it does have cool specs? So let's not wait and talk about it today. Because whether you're saying who on earth is TAC Matsumoto or you're his biggest fan, I think we can all agree we've never really seen an Epiphone exactly spec'd like this. I mean, check it out. We got dual humbuckers with a wrap tailpiece. That's fun. Double gold finish all over, front, back, and sides, neck. You've got the Gibson open book style headstock, but check out the Epiphone logo. It's slightly lower than usual to recreate how some of the original 50s Gibsons are. And while not historically accurate in the slightest, we actually get real mother-of-pearl trapezoid inlays. So, what is the story behind this? Well, first off, TAC Matsumoto. If you're not familiar, we have documented a few of his other signature guitars, including the Gibson USA version of his Les Paul, and a couple of his DC style guitars. They're actually really phenomenal. I would highly suggest checking one of those things out. But he's also had Firebirds and a couple of other weird things. But as far as I'm aware, his most recent signature Gibson model was a Murphy Lab aged version of this gold top, done up around 2022. They didn't make many, and in fact, I had missed that release until these Epiphones came out, and that's when I got excited, because TAC is really known for slapping his name on the guitar and having abalone incorporated into it. There are very few TAC models that just use mother of pearl, but Mr. Matsumoto is part of the group Bees. They are the #1 selling musical act in Japan. They are a big deal. Whenever I talk about him on this show, to help put yourself in the mindset of how big he is over there, I call him the Slash of Japan. I mean, he's right up there with Slash and Bonamassa as far as signature guitars. If you're wondering what's with all these weird specs, it's because this is based on a real 1955 Gibson Les Paul that he owns. Now, typically, Gibson does not reissue 1955 guitars. That's one of those years where nothing really changed, so generally they call it the first year when the big new spec came out. So 54 gold top looks like this, dual P90s, wrap tail. Now, as with everything within Gibson's history, it was never a, hey, January 1st, we're gonna change it, but generally speaking, the next time something big happens is 1956, where we get the two-pneumatic stop bar tailpiece. Before the next year in 57, we finally get humbuckers. So obviously, his guitar has been modified with humbuckers instead of P90s. But what's great is, even if you don't care about TAC, this is kind of like being able to buy an Epiphone Jeff Beck signature, because it's the wrap tail, it's the dual humbuckers. Maybe everything else isn't right, but hey, double gold is a lot of fun. If you didn't know, some gold tops were actually all gold back then. And maybe Epiphone has reissued these at some point. I don't really know, but I just thought that's really cool. If you're going to have a signature guitar, you might as well make Epiphone do some things that they have not done in a long time or ever. Especially that low logo. That is the selling point on this one, in my opinion. That's just so cool. As first impressions right out of the box, this feels solid. Not like your usual Epiphone, but to be fair, this is one of those really expensive ones. $1,299, but that's still $700 cheaper than it used to be for us Americans to get one of these, so I was happy with that. And you know what that means. You get the Gibson electronics in this one as well. But they also said they spec'd it out with a slightly slimmer than a 59 neck profile per TAC specs, but honestly, I don't agree with that at all. This is a really rounded neck. I would say it's a little bit more than a 59, but that will vary example to example. Before that price, what do we get? The guitar, obviously. The case that we saw earlier that has the pink interior, brown exterior. I showed you earlier, it's the Epiphone Inspired by Gibson custom logo on the outside, but you guys know TAC. He likes to have his signature on things, so that's a nice touch that we've got it on the case. But now, do we have any candy? Darn, I was hoping with his influence we might actually be able to get a COA. Well, that's just your regular Epiphone baggie with warranty information, Gibson app experience, stickers, tiny silica packet, truss rod tool, looks like a case key, and strap locks? Yes, these actually come with TAC's preferred strap lock system that I've never heard of before. I know they look like Schallers, but they're not. The spec sheet calls it a Pro Rock Gear brand strap lock. And for historical preservation, the original box tag, as well as the price hang tag from the Gibson garage. So to learn more about the Epiphone version of TAC's 1955 Gibson Les Paul, let's go ahead and throw it onto the workbench to take an individual look at these parts and specs. Inside the new TAC Matsumoto, I was trying to figure out what makes this Epiphone look so much better than the others. It's because we don't have the metric bridge on it, so it kind of throws your brain for a loop just having the wrap tail. I mean, imagine if this had the Gibson style plastics that weren't quite as wide in this area, and it had the pick guard that has the more recessed screw right there rather than one that stands proud. I bet one day we'll see Epiphone do it, but they're going to play around with this for 5 years before going, oh yeah, we rediscovered how to do real rosewood fretboards and Gibson plastics now. That's my prediction for the future anyway, but let's go ahead and check out what pickups TAC has spec'd this Epi out with. It's a Gibson USA Rhythm Burst Bucker Pro in the neck and a Lead Burst Bucker Pro in the bridge. Both of these are utilizing the Alnico 5 magnets. So not exactly custom buckers like we're accustomed to within this series, but hey, this is what TAC wanted. As far as construction, they're utilizing a long neck tenon and everything looks pretty clean in here. Same thing is true in our bridge pickup cavity. However, we do have our QR code as well as the serial number and model designation over here, and we can see through to where the maple top joins onto our mahogany body. Within the circuit, the bridge is Bob, the neck is 7.63, and the middle position, just for fun, 3.92. We'll take another look at that pick guard. It does appear to be thicker than usual. It's quite chunky. It's fairly basically constructed. I don't know what this line and different texture is about on the back, but I thought I'd point it out. But what's going on with our wrap tail piece? It does seem like the anchors within the body are a little bit larger than usual. You really only notice it right there. But the tailpiece itself is actually the Gibson version of a wrap tail. They're marking them with the G, so you know that. That means it's lightweight, but no intonation ridge per TAC's spec. You just have your intonation screws, so you kind of tilt it side by side to get the intonation as best as you can. As far as our controls, anything fancy for TAC doesn't appear to be, so it's just 2 volumes, 2 tones, 1 set for each pickup. But you will notice we have speed knobs on here. That is not historically accurate for a 1955 Les Paul. That's a TAC preferred spec. As far as the top carve, it's not too bad, but I wouldn't say it's like as deep dished as his original, like you can see in some photos. And this one is not aged like the Gibson custom shop version. However, an accidental spec of this is actually quite funny on the neck. The Epiphones, even the Inspired by Gibson custom line, do not get fret nibs. Not even the custom shop version of this guitar got it, because I'm assuming his 1955 original had been refretted at some point in time, and they wanted to pay homage to that. Now, as far as the fret size, they're medium jumbos. You got your regular 22 frets. But we still are using an Indian Laurel fretboard. But oh my, yeah, that looks a lot better than Laurel was looking 10 years ago when like everything was first using it. And the mother of pearl inlays, they're just fun. Original 55s do not utilize mother of pearl, but the IBG series does. We've got a Graphtec nut, and it measures 1.7, about 210 by the 12th. But in feeling this before putting it on the workbench, I think this is a full R8 neck profile. So 0.9 at the first fret. And then by the 10th, it's already 1.01, then 103 by the 12th. Now, as far as the official description of this neck, in the paragraph it says TAC Matsumoto custom neck profile that's slightly thinner than a 59 neck. But then if you go down to the detailed specs, it says the profile is a custom TAC 59 rounded C. I seriously think they meant to say slightly thicker than a 59 profile, because that's what it is in my opinion. Here's a look at that neck at the first fret and the 12th fret. You can see just how rounded it is here. Ultra C-shaped. If you're thinking about one of these and you don't like big chunky necks, I'm honestly going to tell you to pass. But for me, that's a welcome addition to the specs on this thing. It's the chunkiest neck Epiphone that I felt, because we don't currently have R7 reissues within their lineup. It doesn't look like TAC messed with the scale length, still 24 3/4 with a 12-inch fretboard radius. Moving on to the headstock, here's another thing they did incredibly well. So we already talked about the low logo. That is actually mother of pearl as well. It just looks like a decal. You have to have it in the light to see the shininess of it. But do you notice these tuners? They're the vintage style Clusins, so that means you've got the old style bushings around it rather than a screwed on washer. Pair that with the Gibson headstock and that's why this thing looks so good. The only thing that's off is our truss rod cover, being a 3-screwer, but credit where credit's due, they gave it the wide white beveled edge to make it look like a Gibson historic truss rod cover. So fantastic execution on this. So as a big Gibson fan, I think Epiphone did a really nice job on this so far. And as far as QC, I'm not really seeing any tooling marks over here. It is a well-crafted guitar. This is always a tricky spot for Les Pauls. They tend to have finish build up over here, but this one very minor, just like a tad bit right there. And another thing I always check on these Epiphones are the truss rod cover screws. More often than not, the bottom ones are sunk crookedly and they don't actually reinstall that good. This one was perfectly straight. I didn't notice any stripped out holes anywhere, so that is always a good thing. But now let's flip it over to the back. There's actually a couple of really cool hidden details in here as well. So first things first, we actually get brown back plates on this, harkening back to his and other originals. But check this out. Doesn't that look like somebody's upgraded our capacitors with something vintage? He made Epiphone spec these out with gray tiger capacitors. I would assume to match what's in his original guitar. The gray tigers are true paper and oil caps, but those just look so otherworldly as compared to the rest of the wiring. But they are CTS 500K pots in all of the locations. I think just what makes this look weird is kind of the weird looking routing around here. It's not as clean as many Gibsons would be, but it does the job. They put an L over here. So even if you don't like the pickups that are in here, you can easily swap anything into this. The electronics are very fine. But now I'm curious, is this just a Epiphone basic thing they forgot to spec it a certain way, or was his also replaced with a metal plate? Which is common because the plastic ones do break. But here's his strap button at the bottom, and at the top, like usual, as far as the toggle switch, looks like it's a Switchcraft style to me. It's got the same brown backplate. Thin binding in the cutaway present. Yes. However, due to the antique gold finish, you can't see it. But we can see the line where the neck joins onto the body. That's more of just a shadow. It's not as ever present as it's looking at this particular angle. But even on Gibsons, that'll show up within a couple of years. But the gold finish is looking pretty cool and offers us something different from the current Epiphone lineup, which I'm all about. Something else to know about this neck, not that you can see it because it's covered in gold paint, but it's the one-piece mahogany. There's no scarf joins or adding the heel to the neck with another piece of wood. I think it would have been a really cool touch if these Epiphones also had the bare neck, because his custom shop one, they sanded all the finish off, because then you could see that. But at the same time, I can understand why an Epiphone wouldn't. Because that's what's cool about signature guitars. Usually they have at least one or two specs about them that make them cool. So even if you don't care about the artist, you might care about their guitar. And this thing just has that in spades. There's like 5 or 6 really good points that we've talked about. But these are made in China, and we've got our Epiphone branded tuners, double line single ring style, and this whole double diamond thing, we saw it on the case. It's the Inspired by Gibson custom logo. And our serial number dating it to 2024 and some big long production number. But here's another thing that makes this look good. Most Epiphone binding, if they have it on the headstock, comes underneath the nut and meets right here and just looks like an import. This model doesn't have binding on the headstock, only right here, so it looks the part. And all strung back up, this one weighs 8 pounds, 15.5 ounces, so just shy of 9, which is a very nice weight for a Les Paul. So let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this sounds. noticing these pickups clean really well. I mean, that's my usual full dirty channel, is if you got good pick attack versus now let's dial it back to the actual clean tones. So there we go, the new Matsumoto Epiphone documented. What are my final thoughts on this? It's not the most resonant guitar I've ever played, and there is a little bit of fret buzziness to it when you play it acoustically, but I didn't notice any of that amplifying. But I just love all the weird quirky specs that this one has. That's why it was a must document for me. But I was actually surprised when I plugged it in. At first, it was a lot brighter sounding than I was expecting, but it just kept inspiring me to want to play a little bit more to figure out what exactly I want to do with this pickup set. It actually is quite versatile, especially with just how touch sensitive it is. Now, I know you've got a little bit of that in every guitar, but this one just seemed a little bit more so. It spoke to me and said, hey, do this. So I actually would suggest this model if you like what it offers and you are in the market for one of the higher end Epiphones. Ultimately, whether or not you care about tack or any of these quirky specs, it really comes down to the neck profile on this. It's one of the chunkiest Epiphones I have ever experienced, which again is a little bit different from what we saw on the spec sheet, but that's a welcome addition in my book, but I could see how other people might be upset about it. So if you've been looking for that big rounded full C neck shape in the Epiphone lineup, seriously consider this model. If there was one more spec I wish they could get right on these, it's a really small nitpicky thing that if you know, you know. We've got the black side marker inlays. I wish they could have made them the red tortoise shell to make it look closer to a 50s original, because that really would have popped against the gold finish, but that's just a very small, minor cosmetic thing. If you're interested in being the next owner of this review piece, you can find it for sale on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. Otherwise, we'll catch you guys tomorrow on the next one. Take care.